Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please find a seat so we can get started. Members of the committee, if you'll find a seat, make sure that you have a blue folder. With that, Chairman Cantrell, would you be willing to open us in prayer this afternoon?
Let's pray together. God, we come to you again today recognizing how much we need you, how much we need your wisdom, how much we need to be able to see things the way that you do and value people the way that you do. So we ask you today to grant us the wisdom and grace to do right by the state of Georgia. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll call this meeting of the House Education Committee to order. If you wouldn't mind, would you pull that door shut just so I don't have to watch all the people on the other side of the balcony walking by? Thank you for that. Members of the committee, if you'll start in your folder, we're going to begin with Senate Bill 357. Senator Kirkpatrick, if you'll join us at the podium. And if you will just confirm the LC number for the committee and then proceed with the presentation.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I have LC 490889S.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a narrow bill that allows only students of active duty military parents to attend a school across district lines. There are sometimes circumstances that arise with our deployed military that make it difficult for a child of a deployed service member to go to the school that they would normally attend. For example, if the spouse works in another county far from their housing or military installation, they can have problems getting to a sick child. The funds would go to the receiving school, the state funds. The bill is agnostic on the local funds, which would be worked out between the school districts. This would likely affect a small number of students for a short period of time, since a deployment is a maximum of 2 years. And the bill makes it clear that enrollment is subject to capacity and that transportation is up to the parents. I appreciate the help of the Department of Education with this bill. The State Joint Defense Commission, of which I'm a member, we hear at every meeting that K-12 education is a priority for their personnel. States are rated, as I'm sure you've heard from Representative Belton before, by the Department of Defense on their friendliness to the military, and this is a big item in the rating. I hope that you'll help me support the men and women in uniform as they deal with these kids' education in these challenging times. And just to reiterate, this only applies to the kids of active duty military personnel. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Chairman Chokas.
Senator, didn't we already do this? I mean, Dave Belton, I thought we had already passed that. Is that never?
Chairman Chokas, we did pass a House bill that was very, very, very similar to this, but this would be a Senate bill that the senator is presenting. So it's, I think we've seen a lot of this language before.
Okay, thank you.
Anything online? Senator, Chairman Cantrell.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you implying that the Senate finally saw the light on this legislation?
Ooh. Well, I don't know. I'm looking to the Senate Pro Tem over there to see how hard he's laughing.
I'm grateful for the bill, Senator Kirkpatrick. Thanks for bringing it.
Thank you. Senator, seeing no other questions at this time, was the will of the committee? Hold on. Oh, my apologies. Hold tight. I'm a little slow on the technology. Chairman Belton, you're recognized online for a question.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I really appreciate the senator bringing this bill to the committee. As I said before, you know, the military represents $28 billion worth of economic impact. I have a letter here from the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense specifically requesting this bill. And also, it is, as the senator talked about, something we discussed in the Defense Commission all the time. So I sure hope we can pass this in committee. Thank you.
Screen's frozen. There we go. Vice Chairman Irwin, you're recognized for a motion.
Yes, at this time, I'd like to make a motion of due pass.
Motion do pass. Second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Thank you, Senator. Motion carries.
Thank you, sir.
We appreciate you being here.
I believe Representative Belton's going to carry the bill.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you. Mr. Pro Tem, if you would like to join us at the podium, and Senator Miller has Senate Bill 588. If you would confirm for the committee that LC number and proceed forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you Senate Bill 588, LC 490912. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to present in this committee today. I bring to you Senate Bill 588. This bill is about putting parents and students first and ensuring the voices of parents, ensuring that the voices of parents are heard, and that it requires that all meetings of the local school board that are advertised and open to the public follow the guidelines that they have published. The bill specifically states that no member of the public may be removed from the public meeting except in the event of a disruption. If there is a disruption, of course, they can be ejected. Additionally, it provides that visual and audio recordings must be permitted at all public meetings of the local board. And as a means of enforcement, this bill grants an injunctive relief by the state superior courts to enforce compliance with these provisions, including the discretion of attorney fees and legitimate expenses under certain circumstances, should parents be removed for arbitrary or capricious reasons. And I would be delighted to stand for questions, Mr. Chairman. And as I say, I appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Chairman Nix.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Senator, as I look at this, what is new in here that's not in the law now that would allow this to take place? What are we putting in new that's not there now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, the First Amendment trumps all of this. But what we're doing is we're providing injunctive relief. So if a person is ejected from a meeting this Thursday, they can't be prevented from coming back to the meeting the following Thursday unless they've been disruptive or created a problem within the meeting. We've seen it happen on many occasions recently. We've seen it in the news, particularly in our local metro counties, where we had folks ejected from a meeting and then were not permitted to come back the next month. Those school boards aren't jury, judge, and so forth, but they can't keep them from coming back the following meeting.
And that doesn't exist now. The
No,
people
sir.
that were ejected were not ejected for cause. They just said you can't.
They were ejected because they were prevented from going in because they were ejected the previous month.
Okay, and why were they rejected the previous month?
Well, in the judgment of the chair, they were disruptive, but I'm not sure if that was the case or not. I wasn't personally present.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator,
Certainly.
would you agree with me that school board meetings are more than just public forums, they're business meetings, correct?
Certainly.
And as part of the democratic process and allowing transparency and public input, they're conducted in full view and invite participation from the public, right?
And in many cases, broadcast, certainly.
Absolutely. But in order for them to be able to conduct the business of the people, sometimes they need to be able to exclude people who are there merely to disrupt the proceedings.
Certainly, I understand your point. If I could direct your attention to line 20, beginning on line 19, it says, shall be removed from a public meeting of local Board of Education except for the actual disruption. And so that's what we're talking about, the actual disruption versus participation versus an involvement.
And just to clarify a point that I think you were hitting on just previously, there have been some boards that have filed criminal no trespasses. Is that correct? That
That's
would
correct.
exclude people who make a disruption and maybe intimate that they plan to do so in the future from attending future meetings based on before those meetings have occurred.
Yes, sir. I would be in agreement with that.
And so my question is centered around that particular mechanism, the criminal no trespass. Where is that filed? Is that a law enforcement action?
It gives the Superior Court authority to rule on that.
So a judge has to hear evidence and make a ruling on
Yes,
that, and that an evidentiary standard has been met. So there is due process
Yes, sir,
involved,
there is.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And so this would limit the ability of the school board to use that tool?
No, it would not limit the ability of the school board. It would give the school board the ability to use that tool. It would give the opportunity for the judge to make a ruling if it's been deemed inappropriate, if it's deemed that they would have been disruptive, if they cannot keep them from coming to subsequent meetings. So if they could be ejected for this meeting for disruptive behavior, but they could not be kept from attending subsequent meetings.
Okay, now I'm confused. Okay, what is the current law, Senator?
The current law says that the meetings are to be open to the public unless otherwise stated for executive meetings, so forth. This would put into place a mechanism so that if people were ejected from a meeting arbitrarily because of their difference in the views, they would have some relief. They would have some option. They would have an avenue to travel.
And
Currently, that's not the case.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to a conclusion here. The criminal no trespass is a tool available right now, correct, under current law?
If it's used correctly, I would think so. But how would you say a criminal no trespass would be for an event that happened at a previous meeting? We're having a meeting this previous month. How could you keep them from coming to a meeting the following month unless they had been disruptive in that following month's event or meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just finish with this. But we do this all the time in criminal law, right, Senator, with restraining orders for the protection of usually the individual and the community.
A judge does that. That's correct. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Next, online, Representative Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, I do have a question about what about the circumstances under which an individual is continuously disruptive? They come to one meeting, disruptive, get removed. They come back to the second meeting, disrupted, gets removed, comes back to the third. Would the school boards have any discretion to address somebody who has a pattern of behavior?
I think the school board would not be the judge of that pattern of behavior. I think the school board is not a judge itself. If that individual had been disruptive in meeting number 1 and they were ejected and they were disruptive again in meeting number 2, they certainly could be ejected, or even meeting number 3. However, if they're disruptive in meeting number 1, they cannot be prohibited or should not be prohibited from coming back to meeting number 2 as long as they were following the guidelines set forth by the school board.
And I have a follow-up question, Mr. Senator. The term disruptive is pretty broad and vague and left to the interpretation of the school board. What if there are instances of verbal harassment or something that would warrant the school board feeling that they could not safely conduct a meeting publicly?
Thank you very much for that question. If I could direct your attention to line number 21, it says rules of conduct for a meeting open to the public adopted and published by the local school board. So the school board is setting the parameters. The school board is saying what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate behavior. As long as they're following their own guidelines, that would be the point there. Thank you. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. And again, we'll turn online to Pro Tem Jones.
Let's see here.
We can hear you, Madam Pro Tem. Now we can't. Sorry. No, ma'am, we can't.
Think you're muted.
There we are.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Got you now.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good. So on line 17 through 24, this tightens up, I guess, or well, I guess you could say it more clearly defines the type of access that the public would have to school board member meetings. Is that correct?
That's
What is
correct.
current in law?
That's correct. Tightens up and reinforces. That's correct.
And ask, are visual and sound recordings, is that, I thought we already had that in law. Is that not in law now?
Line 23.
Line 23, thank you.
23, 24.
A visual and sound recording shall be permitted. It's not, it doesn't explicitly say, to my knowledge, I may be incorrect, but it doesn't explicitly say that visual and audio recordings can be made at the school boards.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Paris.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate you. Mr. Bertam, how are you today?
Good, thank you.
Great. You know, we're living in a real crazy time where we've got to restore some decorum. And a lot of times when I look at things that we do as legislators, you know, it's kind of like if one person does something, can 10 people come behind that person and do the same thing without really disrupting the course of order and how things should go. And it seems to me that we are in some way here giving license or protecting people that want to disrupt. And I know that may not be the intent.
Certainly not the intent.
It would be like if someone came to a car dealership and was disruptive all the time. You wouldn't want them to have to keep coming back.
That's correct.
We want people to learn that decorum is important in order for business to be conducted and in order for progress to be made. So I'm a little bit concerned about the bill and where it could lead us to, but I'm only one person with one vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative.
Anything else online? Senator, if I may, can you speak just a little bit more for me on Section 4 as far as the courts go, and really what, if any, of this is in current practice or in current law, and how the application of this would work?
Thank you very much. It is not a current practice. It's not in current law. Right now, an individual does not have any recourse. And what this would do on lines 39 and 40, it would say that reasonable attorney's fees and litigations costs that are reasonably incurred shall be reimbursed to the individual. So that is not in statute at the moment.
Thank you. Representative Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, is there any way if a citizen makes a safety threat during a board meeting or on social media to do so, or do it the next time, can they be barred?
Currently, no. To my knowledge, they cannot be.
But your bill says that they can't be barred even if they do make a safety threat.
Well, I think that making terroristic threats would be a whole different level of disruption and would be dealt with by other statutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I just wanted to clear up something you just said in response to the chairman's question. You indicated that parents or anyone excluded from future school board meetings have no recourse. But in order for that exclusion to come into place, there first would have to be a law enforcement action that takes place, correct?
Yes, sir.
In which case, the defendant, the criminal defendant, would have due process and an opportunity to be heard.
Certainly, this does not change, the law doesn't change. What it does is gives recourse to parents who have been unjustly treated or oppressed. That's what it gives opportunity for.
But so are you saying that the judge is oppressing them by issuing the law enforcement order?
No, sir. I'm saying that they would be oppressed if they were thrown out of the meeting arbitrarily without creating disruption. If they were prohibited from attending the following meeting because they had an offense in the previous meeting, that's what this would address. So what you're doing, what is keeping from happening is because someone's thrown out of a March meeting, they come back for the April meeting, they stop them at the door and say, you can't come in. That's what we're trying to address.
Mr. President, that got one more question from Representative Wade.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. As a person that's in the room that was a former school board chairman, I feel like I need to at least comment. I think I understand the intent, but I want to make sure I understand it. I have been in the situation in which we had contentious discussions. Specifically, I remember when I was a new chairman, we were having to make a decision to whether or not to tear down an old school building or not. And we had a process where folks would need to sign up first. Well, we represent all kinds of people, some people that have access to information on a cell phone and some people that do not.
Right.
And we had a gentleman that came to that meeting who was very passionate about his opinion, did not know that there was a procedure to follow. And as the chairman of that meeting, I had the discretion to add that person to the agenda or not. And I've heard situations that have happened in this state, especially over the last few years, to which some people didn't follow that local protocol, and that upset the parent because they didn't get to be heard, or the constituent in this case. This would allow just for that discretion to be used and to ensure that if somebody just maybe gets a little bit emotional because they feel like they're being silenced and that First Amendment right is being thwarted because they didn't follow a sign up to speak procedure, that it would not prohibit that person then from having the opportunity to sign up the appropriate way, come back the next meeting, just because they might have gotten a little bit upset and asked to leave, not because they threatened an individual, but because they didn't understand the process fully and they just felt like they were being silenced. Is that,
thank you.
Is that the aim?
You bring a great deal of clarity to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I think that exhausts our questions. If you would allow me, I have one thing that I'd like to see if you and I could sit down and compare notes on and work on this bill. We have another meeting scheduled on Wednesday, and I'd love to look at that with you if possible after this meeting.
I appreciate that very much.
And be back here on Wednesday if that's acceptable with you.
That works just fine for me. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President.
See you on Wednesday.
Up next, Senator Halpern, Senate Bill 545. If you will, Senator, tell us about your bill. Make sure we're working on the same LC number.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 545, that's LC 490877.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
So SB 545 makes a small change to existing law, but it expands our state's existing CPR and defibrillation training to include basic first aid training, and it recommends 1 hour minimum of instruction to these life-saving techniques. So we already know that we have pre-COVID a shortage in our state of EMTs and paramedics. And at the same time, we also know that this kind of instruction through the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America, which had been filling the gap for that education, their membership has also steadily gone down. And I think literally in the years between 2019 and 2020, this is before we even have hit COVID, Boy Scouts membership dropped 43% and Girl Scouts membership dropped 30%. This is nationally, with each organization now having barely over a million members each. So as a result, many of our young people, they're just not getting that basic training that they need to be prepared for emergency situations. We already know the benefits of CPR training. That is something that we added to our code just about a decade ago, and it has helped very much having that in our educational curriculum to ensure that Georgia is able to improve on the figures of what happens when somebody has a sudden cardiac arrest and outside of a hospital setting and doesn't receive help from a bystander who doesn't know how to help. And we know that the rates of survival decrease every moment that goes forward without that kind of assistance. So this additional first aid training will help us to be able to save even more lives. And there are already existing programs. The American Red Cross has a program ready now that's designed specifically for high schoolers. It's called First Aid for Severe Trauma, or FAST training, and it equips young people to save lives, keep people safe in emergency situations, communicate in emergencies, and stop severe bleeding. The National Federation of State High School Associations also has a prepared course on first aid training. The American Heart Association has championed and provided first aid training through their Heart Saver First Aid program, which teaches first aid basics, medical emergency and injury emergency training. And so if COVID has taught us anything, it's that we need to be better prepared for everything. And if we begin to train our students now, we will have a state full of people who are prepared to act when someone is injured or their life is at risk. I want to point out that while I believe that this is an important measure for people wherever they live throughout the states, I think that this has particular emphasis for those who may live in more rural communities where we've seen our hospitals close and where medical help might be much further out, and to be able to have people who are on the ground and know how to respond quickly can be very helpful. Basic first aid, this includes choking, bleeding, sports injuries. Those are the kinds of things that they would receive training for should this bill to pass. And the tools are already there. Now we just have to give them to our students so that as many people as possible know what to do in case of an emergency.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I just wanted to thank you for bringing this bill. I think it is a great bill, common sense, and especially, and you hit on this too, but especially when you think about our high schoolers often have jobs, and we're not just training them to use these skills when they're at school, but also when they're in the workplace, and just makes our whole state much more safer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, you talk about having these courts. Who's going to pay for the equipment that all these schools are going to have to buy?
That is a fair question. So now I will share with you that in preparing this bill, and again, it's just a minimum of an hour. There are, like I said, organizations who are already doing this. Even the Medical Association of Georgia, they have a program. I spoke specifically to the Department of Education when I was preparing the bill, and cost was actually not an issue that was raised at all. So I don't have a particular dollar figure to give you, except to say that there are programs that exist that can be used already at our schools that are at little to no cost. So it should not have a significant barrier in that regard.
So you follow up, Mr.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a course that these students are going to have to take, correct?
So yes, the idea is that, well, and it could be a course per se. It's really to get the training and spend an hour on that. So yes, it might be its own course that becomes part of health or PE, because those are the two kind of health graduation requirements. But yes, that is correct.
Well, if you're going to teach that, don't you think the person that's doing the teaching ought to be certified?
Yes, I think the person who's teaching needs to be certified, but that does not have to necessarily be a teacher who already is in that classroom. That is the point where you can bring in an organization that's doing this work already and use their certified instructors to make sure our students are learning correctly.
I might have another one in just a minute, but I'm done right now.
Chairman Cantrell.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. Chairman Benton took my first question, but I guess secondly, do we require this training of our educators currently?
I actually don't know if our educators are required. I don't know that we require it of every educator. I know that in every school there has to be people who know what to do in cases of emergency, but I don't actually know how pervasive that is.
Would you think that was a good idea?
I do.
Might be a good add to the bill?
I do. Yes. Would you like to amend it that way? I think that that's great. I mean, the truth of the matter is, even as we've been talking about it, even kind of amongst ourselves in the Senate, you know, there are evolving trends. And so even for those of us, I know I took a class when my oldest was born, and he's now 18. Things have changed, right? We're not doing mouth-to-mouth anymore. We're doing only chest compressions. So I do think that you raise a great point, which is that the more people who know what to do in an emergency, the better. The less reliance that we have to have on only paramedics to come and help on the moment. It's ideal for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I just got a quick question on line 15. We talk about in grades 9 or 10.
Yes.
Is this when health is taught within the standards?
Yes.
And so they're generally, so you're trying to get this added to what is taught within the standards that's out there?
Yes. So originally, when I was first drafting the bill, I actually originally said 9th and 11th grade. I actually wanted 2 touch points, but in working with the Department of Education, they said if you're willing to forego the 2 touch points and do 9th or 10th, that is when the majority of students are actually taking courses that are required for their graduation. And if you go beyond 10th, then they may or may not actually be able to get that training because they may or may not take the requirement.
Man, just another question. And you put in first aid within that 1 hour of no less than 1 hour. You know, that is a very broad.
Yes.
You know, I think in the bill now it's prescriptive. It's got to be CPR. And then you're putting a very broad term in that. Don't you think that might reduce the amount of CPR and other things, or use of an external defibrillator, by putting such a broad term in there?
Yes, thank you for raising that issue. I actually think that if you would like to propose it, I think that there is room to change those lines, 13 through 15. The intention was to add the minimum of an hour of basic first aid training, and I think that as it's written now, it reads as though at least 1 hour on first aid and CPR and defibrillation, which was not actually the intent. The intention was not to mess around with the training that students are already getting in CPR, because that's urgent, and we've been doing that a decade. It was to simply add at least 1 hour of the basic first aid.
And Senator, I think if you'll give us just a moment to satisfy these other questions,
yes,
I think we might be able to address that. Representative Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator. I definitely like the concept, and I, as a person who's been around it a long time, I think it's important. The only clarification I want is, what is where is or what is the definition of first aid? So is it, you know, the American Medical Association's definition, and would that be, I just want to make sure, because I think the other two are pretty prescriptive as to exactly what they are. And first aid, you know, I've gone through stop the bleed training, I've gone through security training in my other job, my career, so that to me is a very broad, and I just want to understand that piece of it.
Yeah, there are, so first aid, emergency care, and I, to the question that we just had before, so I was not actually trying to be super prescriptive, but say within the bounds, you know, let's just make sure that our students have the opportunity to learn some of these things. First aid, so you've got CPR, which is clear, that's sudden cardiac arrest, that's that. And 38 states and DC actually have CPR as a requirement. So yay, Georgia, because we're one of them, and we've been doing this for almost a decade. First aid in all other emergency situations, as I understand it, really does include choking, bleeding, choking, cuts and fractures, some sports injuries, that kind of a thing. But I would leave it up to the folks who are running the program at even the Department of Education to define what exactly they want to narrow the scope down to and recommend to all of the boards of eds across the state.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Senator, thank you for this bill. Good bill that I see here. It's always good to stay up with the technology that we are using today. The fact that CPR has changed in the methods and by what we do, it's always good to be sure that we are in front of it rather than behind it. My question or questions today are, when you were addressing Representative Benton's certification issues, are you talking about the health and PE teacher certification in the classroom, or are you talking about first aid certification, which are two separate things? You said taught by a certified teacher, of course, that is required, but are we requiring the health and PE teachers to have first aid certification in current?
So if that's already a requirement, I'm unsure if that's already a requirement. I'm not suggesting in this bill that the schools can decide who it is that's certified that they will have teach the children. If it ends up being already their health instructor, that's great. And I would love it if everybody who is running the health program at a school actually is already certified. Not knowing that, however, I did not want to say that really this bill is requiring us to make sure that the faculty is educated and certified and then go on to be able to teach the students. It can go either way as far as I'm concerned. More than anything, I'm trying to make sure our students, kind of that next generation, gets this kind of training. But if the teachers are already certified, then they would be very appropriate to teach it to the students.
Okay. And a follow-up question, if you don't mind. Let's talk about cost here for a second.
Yes.
Are we requiring schools to have defibrillators? I know their training, if they're already certified, would not cost more, but are we requiring the defibrillators there?
Yes, but that was already in the code, so I didn't touch that part.
Okay.
That's already there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Paris.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator, thank you. All right, so it says grades 9 or 10. How old are these people?
So you're looking at 15, just depends, but let's just say 15, 16, could be 14, 15. It depends a little bit on the students, but kind of in that age range, 14 to 16.
Okay. I could say something really funny right now, but I'm going to let it go. Thank you.
Representative Maynor online.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there, and thank you for the bill. As someone that is certified in first aid and CPR and has also been an instructor in it, I have just a couple suggestions. You answered one, that the school would have outside resources that they would contract with. And so one question was, would that just be through an RFP process through the school system, or would the individual schools be doing an RFP process? The other question was related to cost, but if it is an outside company doing it, then I'm assuming the school won't have costs, because the cost of defibrillators are usually, anywhere from $1,400 to $1,700, even though you don't need to use an actual one to do the training, but even the dummy ones might be $1,000. And then the other thing just to think about, even if the health teacher is certified in first aid, he or she would have to be certified as an instructor to teach someone else to be certified in first aid. So that's another set of training skills and those are just some things to be thinking about as we progress with the bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, committee, if you will indulge me, I do like the senator's recommendation on line 14 that it may not have been her intent to combine AED, CPR, and first aid in 1 hour. And so I would love our legislative council friends to help us should the will of the committee be such to get us to that point. So at this time, I'd be happy to entertain a motion on the bill. We have a motion. We have a second. At this point, I will recognize legislative counsel to maybe help us with a proposed amendment on what that language change might look like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend if there was an amendment to replace lines 13 through 15 with the following language: which operates a school with grades 9 through 12 shall provide instruction in cardiopulmonary resuscitation and the use of an automated external defibrillator, and no less than 1 hour of instruction in first aid to its students in grades 9 or 10 as a requirement within existing.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So with that, I will happily propose that as the Dubnik amendment. Is there a motion on the amendment? Yeah, hands everywhere. All right, great. And a second. All those in favor of the Dubnik amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? Okay, the amendment is adopted. Now there's a motion and a second before this committee that Senate Bill 545, LC 490877 do pass. Is there any discussion? So, as amended by the committee. Thank you for keeping us on our toes. It's still early, haven't had the third cup of coffee. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you, Senator.
Thank
we
you
appreciate
so much. I appreciate it.
One
Thank
more.
you.
All right.
You need to know.
Senator, Senate Bill 603, if you want to come join us up here. I know you've got a simple bill, and I appreciate you bringing it. So if you'll confirm our LC number and move through our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is LC 510101. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman and member of this committee. I bring you this bipartisan Senate Bill 603, which will create a pilot program in at least minimum 2 different schools for outdoor learning spaces and to report their effectiveness. This bill encourages the support of Green School Year pilot around the state as recommended by the Outdoor Learning Study Committee that we had last year. The purpose of this program is to add school-level data into existing state agency and private Green School Year survey tools and maps, providing decision makers with critical information needed for a statewide rollout of Green School Year. Outdoor learning improves educational outcomes by improving children's academic performance, focus, behavior, and love of learning. In fact, economically disadvantaged students experience greater benefit from outdoor learning relative to other students, which could help many children in rural and urban areas across Georgia. Nowadays, kids spend 90% of their time indoors and much of that in front of screen. Screen time has gone up for most kids during COVID-19. These spaces can be enjoyed by kids, but also by their families and the community during out-of-school time. These bills provide Georgian communities with outdoor classroom, native gardens, storm water capture, traditional playground, nature play areas, vegetable garden, trail, trees, water features, and so on. Regular access to high-quality green space inspires strong connection to the nature world, which is crucial to children's physical and mental health. Because of this, my dear colleagues, I think this is a great bipartisan bill that signifies a great opportunity for the students and the children of Georgia to be involved in outdoor education, outside of indoor class hour, in the world of need of connection with nature. I urge you to vote in favor of this bill. If you have any question, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Senator. And just to confirm, this has the support of the Department of Education?
That's correct.
And this would give them a pilot program, as it says in line 14, to determine how to implement minimum statewide standards for outdoor learning spaces, correct?
That's correct.
And is it not also true that in my district, we have Alachi Nature Center that has a K through third grade school program that is 100% outdoor? Is that not true?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I visited the center myself during the learning, the outdoor study program that we had, and I enjoyed being there myself.
Thank you very much. Chairman Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the funding for the program. I see on line 18, the bill says the program may provide funding to the pilot schools. And then I notice on lines 20 through 21, the local school board for the pilot schools shall agree to implement a program to incorporate outdoor learning spaces. Is it the state that is going to be providing the funding?
May provide. Currently, Representative, there's different organizations currently doing it in Georgia, metro area, 5 different schools. It's really funded by several foundations, and school system didn't have to put much money at all beside the space. So there's an agreement between some of the foundation. They're willing to provide more money needed for this pilot program.
So I just want to make sure that we're not going to require that the local school board pay for this. I mean, not every single school system would be able to afford it, and it looks like schools don't volunteer, that the schools are going to be selected by the Department of Education.
Currently, the 5 schools that I know of in Metro Atlanta, when these different organizations such as Children Nature Network and some of the local organizations, they participate in the program, when they advertise that they're going to do this program, 50 different schools wanted to participate in it. Out of that, 5 is participating right now. So there's a huge demand that school system and the private organization willing to work together to resolve this,
okay, thank
get
you.
this program going.
Ladies and gentlemen, I see all the blinking lights here, so just bear with me for a moment. We're going to get to them in order. Madam Pro Tem online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Senator. About 20 years ago, when I came into office, outdoor classrooms were they were the popular thing at the time, and the legislature had a thing called earmarks, where legislators would earmark for one of these for their communities. And I actually, as a PTA mom, took on a project like this, although mine was not funded at the state level. It was funded through good old-fashioned fundraising. And we fundraised, and I had an area paved at the local middle school, and it's still there today. It serves as an outdoor classroom. I guess my point being, this has been around for a long time locally, either through parents getting together fundraising or school boards making funds available. In 2022, school boards have the highest reserves that they've had in the 20 years I've been in the legislature. Why do we need to drive this at the state level? Why not just leave this up to local control and let school boards who have the space or the interest do this themselves, as opposed to the state beginning to go down the path of taking on this as another thing that folks will be coming to us and asking us for funding for?
With due respect, we're not really enforcing, we're not mandating this one. This is a pilot program to see how it can be effective, for our children, mental health, trying to get connected with the nature. That's what we're trying to do. The school board can decide themselves whether they want to participate. We are not forcing anyone.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question. These exist throughout the state now. They're definitely not at every school system, but I've seen them at numerous schools. I guess I'm trying to figure out why the state needs to take this on as a function of our responsibility to encourage it when school boards have, most of them have sufficient funding, if this is important to them to put it, or if they have the space. Why do we need a pilot program, I guess is my point.
Well, during the outdoor learning study committee that I had, I visited several of the school, and I think this is a lot of school system in the state does not know about this program. So this one, I'm going to encourage the statewide. If somebody wants to get in, wants to do that, they'll have a venue, have an access. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. Chairman Jaspers.
Chairman.
Hold on, it's frozen. There we go.
There we go. And thank you, Senator. Yeah, I just really want to second what Speaker Pro Tem just said. I mean, it's kind of got my thunder there a little bit, but I live in a very rural area, and half of my school systems have outdoor classrooms now. So I don't think it's the issue of people not knowing about it. I think it's an issue that some parents, teachers get together, as Speaker Pro Tem said, and create these opportunities, and they're being done across the state. And I have hesitation in this bill because it seems like it's trending or setting the stage for a mandate down the road that people should have these.
There's no intention of mandate at all. I mean, I'm a firm believer of local control, and the school system can decide themselves whether they want to. We are not asking anybody to join or to participate.
Thank you. Representative Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, starting on line 13, going to line 14, it says the purpose of the pilot program shall be to determine whether and how to implement minimum statewide standards and funding for outdoor learning classrooms. It looks to me like that could be a mandate right there if the pilot goes through and they come up with statewide standards. That would be pretty much that the schools are going to have to come up with the money to do that.
One of the things we're trying to do is a minimum standard, just a minimum standard, what needed to be done. That's what, not necessarily, I'll be glad to work it out, the language, if we need to change anything to make sure we mandate anything. I have no problem with that. I'll be glad to work with that.
And with that, Senator, I've got same thing that I told the President before. I think a number of members have raised a couple of good concerns and questions, and I'd like to work with you on those. Again, we do have another meeting scheduled this week, so I will get with you after this meeting, and let's compare notes that I have here from today and some of the members' concerns, and we'll hear this back again, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Up next, Senator Dixon. I believe you have Senate Bill 514. If you want to join us up here and confirm that LC number. And
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, committee members, I bring Senate Bill 514 in front of you today, LC number 490846 EC.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, while we confirm this to make sure the version that's in front of you is the same version that the senator is presenting, we'll just stand at ease for a few minutes since we need to confer with a few people. So just stand at ease. I saw your text. You're good. No, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you will come back to order, we're going to move on. And I believe that the senator has a new referenced LC number that should look just like the one in front of you. If you want to confirm that for us, Senator.
And we did have a floor amendment on the Senate, just for the rest of your colleagues to be aware of. The sunset period in the bill originally was 1 year, and we amended that to 5 years. So that's where the change was in the LC number, just to be clear with everybody.
And that LC number you have in front of you is?
Yes, sir. That's correct. It's SB 514/FA.
Thank you, Senator. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Today I bring before you Unmasked Georgia's Students Act. I'm grateful to be working alongside the governor yet again to fight for the well-being of students and to uphold the rights of parents. The Unmasked Georgia Students Act reaffirms what has always been true. Parents are the best decision makers when it comes to the health and education of their children. This legislation ensures that those rights are not infringed on by misguided policies. This bill ensures that no local board of education, governing board, superintendent, or state charter school could impose a mandate, any mandate, or ruling that a student wear a mask without an opt-out option for parents. It does not remove mask rules or say that students cannot wear a mask. Regardless of political party, our children should not be required to wear masks that inhibit learning. Georgia and America, we're moving swiftly and safely out of the global pandemic. We need to begin to return to normal, and this is a first step in doing so. I do want to be clear, this bill does not take away a person's ability to wear a mask or say that a school district cannot implement a mask mandate. Some other issues that have come up from extended mask wearing, especially for students in the classroom, some negative effects on children. For example, are masks prevent students and teachers from hearing each other in classrooms or make it more difficult. Masks hinder instruction and student progress. Masks slow the development of social skills, especially in early grades. Masks further a sense of disconnect. Masks do not provide the quality protection we were initially led to believe, and masks create a major ongoing distraction for students and educators. It is past time for our children to return to normal in the classrooms and for parents to make the decisions for what's best for their children, not the government. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, a couple of questions. The first one is this. When the pandemic started, we had no idea where this thing was going, what the severity of it would have been. If this had been in place, is there a chance that some of the school systems would just have shut down if enough students would not have worn masks, and rather than having children in school with masks, we would just shut it down?
No, I don't believe so. This doesn't take away local control with the school districts, and I would argue that, this bill, is at the heart of local control, because, where is more local control than parents over, the guiding of their children and the education, the well-being of them. But no, I don't believe so. This would just allow parents to opt their child out. It would not hinder a school system from implementing a mask mandate. So no, I don't believe so.
Can I follow up? That bothers me. That particular issue bothers me. The second thing is, what is the magic of the 5 years in terms of when this would expire?
Yeah. And something else I would like to add to your previous question, if I could. This bill would not prohibit, God forbid, another pandemic of some other nature from the governor implementing, any of the executive orders that would overrule this bill. So if, 2 years from now there's another pandemic through executive order, he could require mask mandates, which would overrule this. But as far as the 5 years, originally we had it at 1 year, but given different variants and not certain how long this particular pandemic will last, we thought that 5 years were more suitable as far as making sure that we're through with this pandemic before this expires.
One other follow-up. Does it say that in here anywhere that the governor can override this? Is that a given, or what would be the pushback if the governor decided to override this if, heaven forbid, a couple of years from now we have another pandemic?
Yeah, it's through his executive power as governor.
And he could override this?
Yes, sir.
Through his executive power?
Yes, sir.
Through the public state of emergency that was declared at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Carter, sorry, looking at you, and I need that cup of coffee. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator. So, Senator Dixon, do you think it's important to keep our schools open, as Representative Nix was asking?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And so I'm very concerned about the learning loss that has incurred over these, especially during the pandemic. And do you know how would this legislation affect, how would this improve the learning loss situation?
As far as the learning loss, dealing with students being out of school, digitally taught, and then having masks on, I would say it's a start. I mean, it is, unfortunately a given that there are a lot of students that are behind from the pandemic, from schools being shut down and having to be digitally taught. I've heard different reports that on average, a student is about a year behind after the pandemic, and we do need to focus heavily on making up that education gap that we've got. But I think empowering parents will most certainly help us do that. I think this bill helps, but it definitely, we need other legislation to help close that gap as well.
Right. May I have a further question, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I'm just very concerned because I think we all can agree we need to keep our schools open, and if there should be other variants of this pandemic, masks have been shown to help schools stay open, and I just would be very concerned about limiting this possibility for school boards to have a mask mandate that parents could just not cooperate with.
No, and I respect your question, or your question and answer there, but I would say that especially with the newer variants, it's been found that the mask, unless they're the N95, which aren't sized for children, they're sized for adults, so they don't fit children correctly to prevent the spread of COVID-19. That the masks are not as effective as they were, and in school districts that don't have mask mandates or haven't had them for a while versus school systems that have, as far as an infection rate, I've not seen where there's a vast difference there.
Thank you. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, can you help me understand what learning loss occurs from students wearing masks?
I'll go back to my opening remarks. I would say that it does prevent teachers, as far as communication with students, especially in early grades, not being able to see the facial expressions of their teacher, so on and so forth, like I mentioned in my opening remarks, is what has led, and some factors. I know, students having to be forced to be taught digitally at home, and, certain school systems were well prepared for that, and certain school systems weren't. I know I'm getting off topic here, but I know that leads to other issues as far as students falling behind, but masks do contribute to that.
And I
I
appreciate your response to my colleague Representative Evans on some scientific knowledge about masks. Can you tell us what your profession is?
Real estate.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how this bill improves student achievement, and since we've had some testimony about scientific information as it regards masks, I would like to move that we transfer this bill to the Health and Human Services Committee, where it can be properly considered.
I appreciate that, but I did not hear that in the form of a motion, so there's no need for a second for that, but we'll continue with our line of questioning, and we'll bring that subject back up in a little while when appropriate. Representative Paris.
Thank you,
I'll be happy to give you some quotes from the Food and Drug Administration. If that would help you.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator.
Yes, ma'am.
wondering, do you have any kind of backup from the CDC or WHO or any medical scientific information that really lets us know that the mask did not help and that unmasking children is the way for us to go? We know that we're in a point in time now where we're not finished. This thing probably will ramp up again, especially during the fall. Do you have any kind of scientific backup for what this bill is trying to do? An educator told me a long time ago, she said, you know, the children are always the first ones that America puts on the front line. When it came to integration, the kids were the ones that had to break us in on it. So now here we are again, putting them on the front line with health issues, and I'm having a hard time with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative LaRicchia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'd start by finding it oddly ironic that a lawyer would ask you what your profession is, in that we can't all work together to make decisions about the future of this state when they are certainly digging into their share of the issues up here on everything we do. But is it not true that, like myself, that our parents, first and foremost, besides what we do in our occupations, I visit my children's schools. How many of you have actually went to that 4th grade class or that 6th grade class, and almost every mask that the children was wearing was down here around their chin or below their nose? And then they're touching that mask and touching everything between their desk and the playground. To think that people like me that are in the termite and pest control business don't have enough common sense to come up here and help make decisions for the parents of these schools is ridiculous. But the government forcing these children to wear masks, and this is where the reduced learning's coming in, they're spending 30% of their time trying to get that child to wear that mask the correct way, and it's still not working, so they're losing that 30% of the time, instead of teaching the children what they should actually be learning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Representative. And I've got, I could go on and on up here, but I've got quotes from physicians, that say that, COVID-19 is less of a threat to children than the common flu. And, it's 0.119 or something like that percent of children that actually, so a fraction of a fraction, less than, just right at a tenth of 1% that actually contract COVID actually have severe symptoms from it.
Representative Wynn, online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I think all of us in this body probably agree that learning how to navigate this pandemic, we're in an unprecedented position, and even in this General Assembly, we had to wear masks to protect each other and protect our family members and people's children. I would think that the learning loss that school children experience was probably because of this hybrid learning model, because of having to learn virtually to keep everybody safe, because of having to adapt to something that rapidly impacted the lives of all of us. Would you agree that that has to do with learning loss more so than the act of wearing a mask?
Well, as one of the representatives stated, I am a real estate guy by profession, but I would, and so as far as weighing one from the other, I probably wouldn't be the best for categorizing that. But it doesn't negate the fact that it makes it more difficult for teachers to communicate with children. It makes it more difficult for children to see the expression, or they can't see the expression on the teacher's face as they're giving the lesson. And then, not to negate the fact with children with learning disabilities that struggle in a normal classroom, no matter what severity it is, and they're already struggling to keep up, the masks hinder that further. And that's just a fact. I've talked to, I've got I would like to recognize the entire two back rows on the left-hand side of this auditorium are families that are here in support of the bill. And some do have some special needs children, and they've expressed the difficulties they've had over the past 2 years dealing with a mask in classroom and how far their children have fallen behind, unfortunately.
And Senator, I do have a follow-up question. There's a lot of conversation around the public health aspect of this, and even sentiments that this should not be heard in education because of the facts surrounding public health. Does Dr. Toomey have a position on this bill?
Dr. Toomey, yes. So she met with the governor directly. Once it was explained to her that it would not prevent a child from wearing a mask, she was fine with the legislation. She was also fine with the change to the sunset as well.
And Senator, would we be able to see some of that testimony or affirmation from Dr. Toomey, since it is a public health issue?
I'm sure you could, yeah, I mean, sure, I'd be happy to provide that for you.
Representative Wynn.
But I believe it was a in-person meeting with the governor when they discussed this legislation.
Representative Wynn, I'd ask that you get with the senator after this meeting to confirm that, or for him to provide comment accordingly. But I would think that the gentleman would not represent comments that he was not completely sure of. So I believe the gentleman knows of which he speaks. So with that, Representative Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the bill, and I hear you, and I understand where you're trying to go with this. But the Education Committee, our focus really has been around education policy, and this does sound more like a health-related issue that maybe the Health and Human Services Committee may have been a better suited place for this versus the Education Committee, because we're not really hearing how this is affecting learning loss, how it's affecting the classroom, but we definitely hear your argument of how it is, you know, it's a health crisis and how it's affecting in that regard. So it's hard for us to really comprehend what you're trying to do in the Education Committee from a policy standpoint, when the Health and Human Services Committee probably would have been the better choice for this type of legislation.
And
So did you consider that?
Representative, that would be a question for the Speaker of the House, not for the author of the bill, as the Speaker is the one that determines which committees both House and Senate bills are assigned to. So with all due respect, that would not be a question for the author.
Yeah, but Chairman, with all due respect, we have seen authors of bills go to chairmen to ask that the bills transfer to another committee that is more suitable.
Sure, I understand. Chairman Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Senator. I've heard a lot of testimony from members of the committee that masks in schools have been proven scientifically helpful, but it's my understanding that there has been just as much scientific evidence that they are actually not helpful and can actually lead to additional problems. And my child attends a school with approximately 1,800 students on campus, and they didn't have a mask mandate, and they never had more than, I think, 8 or 10 incidents at one time during this last school year. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm recollecting that the Cobb County school system did not have a mask mandate this school year, and the Gwinnett County school system did, and that the incidence rate of COVID cases in the Cobb County schools was lower than that of the Gwinnett County. Am I recollecting correctly?
You are correct, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Our last question from Representative Wilson and then Representative Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to clarify, my earlier question was not meant to demean realtors or yourself. I just wanted to point out that if we're hearing technical, discussing the technical aspects of masks or the science of COVID, that it would be better considered by experts in the field. So I look forward to hearing from whatever witnesses we're going to hear from today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There we go. Representative Wade.
All right, thank you very much. First, I've got a question for the author of the bill, and then at the appropriate time, I think I'm ready based on his answer. So I have 2 children that are in elementary school, and my wife is an educator. As a parent, I consult our primary care physician for our medical advice. And would anything in this bill prohibit me as a parent, if I want my child to wear a mask in their school for any reason, whether it be a COVID-19 or a flu or any other local outbreak, would I be prohibited as a parent from doing that?
No,
in this
you
bill?
would not, Representative.
Would my wife, if she decided due to her own personal medical needs, had her doctor's advice, would there be anything in this bill that would prohibit my wife from wearing a mask?
No, sir.
Okay. And has anybody had any conversation about the opposite side of what would be like if we were having a conversation about mandating that no masks could ever be worn at any time and the encroachment on that freedom? Has that topic come up during your debate on this issue?
No, sir.
Okay, well, I think that's the other side of the coin that has been lost, and I appreciate the bill. And Mr. Chairman, appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion to do pass.
Now would be the time to make that motion.
I make a motion to pass on Senate Bill 514, SB 514/FA.
There is a motion and there is a second. Now will be the time for discussion. Representative Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like my earlier motion for this bill to be transferred to the Health and Human Services Committee to be considered at this time.
And Representative, again, I believe that this matter is related to education. I believe in the Speaker's office and his determination that this bill reside in our committee, and therefore would not recognize you for this motion. So there is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And the board's frozen again. Seeing none. Anything online? Thank you. All those in favor of Senate Bill 514 FA do pass, please raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you, members of the committee. This motion carries. I believe that is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you, Senator. Members of the committee, yes, I have a count of 11 yay, 6 nay. Thank you. Members of the committee, as you heard today, we have 2 bills that are literally being worked on as we speak. My plan, hear me here, we have this room from 1 until 4 on Wednesday. My plan would be to meet at 1 o'clock. Unless we have an extended session, it'll be the 2 bills that we've already heard, so it should be short. So think of it as 1 p.m. or upon adjournment. With that, we stand adjourned.